One wrong decision can kill a TCG. Does Cyberpunk have what it takes to make the right one? Welcome back to the Budget Archive. My name is Mitch, and for those who haven't seen me before, welcome to the channel. I predominantly do Grand Archive content. However, I've been looking at expanding a little bit into some newer games, and Cyberpunk has really caught my eye. I have never really done much Cyberpunk stuff before. I've played a little bit of the games, but that's about it. Generally, I have been mainly a TCG player, not a video game player. So with that, everything I have to say about this comes from the point of view of TCG players, not of people who just like the IP. So I can't really comment on in terms of like the thematics of the game or how it connects back to the overall lore. However, I definitely have a decent insight into TCGs, seeing as I've been doing them for the last 14 years or so. However, congratulations first off to Cyberpunk. $26,959,000. I believe it's actually just clicked over $27 million from the late backers. However, that's unheard of. Of course, as you will have heard, it is the highest funded game ever on Kickstarter. However, it's just, I don't even know how they got this bloody high. 47,000, almost 48,000 backers for a single game that doesn't come out for months is just something unreal. Now, that comes with positives and negatives. As we will see from a certain game in the past, that was the previous highest backer, things don't always go to plan. You can't always guarantee that a game from Kickstarter is going to come into reality and everyone's going to get their stuff. However, based on what I've seen from the devs of this game, I believe this has a good chance of making it. In terms of the starter deck products for this game, I think they've done a very good job of just keeping it simple, keeping it something that's going to be good for a new player to pick up and play with. With it being a 40 card deck, it is a lot easier to construct a deck in this game. Of course, it is 40 card minimum, as we see, and a 50 card maximum. However, I generally see with most TCGs, you're going to go with the lower amount because you want to have the highest consistency in your deck in order to guarantee you're going to see the certain cards each game. And with only having 3 copies of each card in the deck, that means that you're not going to have the consistency that most 60 card decks have with 4 copies of pretty much guaranteed to see a certain card a game most of the time, unless you're unlucky. But with it being a 40 card, that effectively brings it to the exact same odds, if not better odds, to see certain cards. As for the starter decks, the one thing I am worried about with these is the fact that they're including 5 unique cards in each starter deck. Now, I haven't seen an actual official confirmation on it, but from what I've been able to find, they are doing 2 copies of each of those unique cards in these decks, meaning you're going to have to buy 2 of each starter deck in order to have your playset. And if these cards become meta viable or they become very high powered cards that you have to have in order to do well, then you're going to end up in situations where the starter decks might become hard to find locally, and you'll have a lot of people trying to scalp on the secondary market and such. So yes, they're going to overprint this completely, make it something that's easily accessible for all players. But you do need to be careful when putting exclusive cards into starter deck products that they aren't overpowered to the point of suddenly you've got no starter decks left on the market. Giving you all the dice and everything in the starter deck is definitely great, especially seeing as it's a key part of the game. I'm not a huge fan of paper playmats, but I guess it's something that's needed, especially if you're a new player to TCGs and you haven't played one before and don't have any mats. In terms of the actual set itself, we have 140 unique cards in the set. That is on top of the 5 unique cards in the starter deck, so technically 145, but 140 from the actual boxes themselves. With 31 alternate cards. This is effectively the cards that are already in the main set with just fancy different version of it. We don't really know exactly what they're going to look like yet, but they've given a few little spoilers and such here and there. The full breakdown of this is the 60 commons, 32 uncommons, 32 rares, 12 epics, and 4 secret rares. With 31 iconic rares, that's the alternate arts. Now, The one thing I'm worried about with the first set is, yes, apparently they're going to have these out in the third quarter of this year, and then following that, the first quarter of next year is meant to be the second set. So with it only being maybe 3-4 months between the two sets, we should be okay meta-wise. However, because it's only 140 cards, that it leaves very limited deck building possibilities. For reference, a lot of the other games that come out these days generally have about a 280 to 340 cards in their first set, meaning that when you pick up that first set, you're opening boxes, there's a lot of cards to collect, a lot of different things you can build, and you generally find that the meta is constantly changing as people discover new things in the game. Only having 140 cards means that you're going to end up in situations where it becomes very evident very early on what is the thing you want to play, what cards are actually good, what aren't, and you're going to end up in situations where there's a lot of probably expensive cards, then a lot of the other cards are kind of worth nothing. So as we'll see in the breakdown soon for the boxes themselves, you're going to end up with multiple playsets of rares effectively, and it's going to be rough, especially if you open cases of the set. Then you're not going to end up with a lot of value unless you hit the real high-end chase cards. Now, the iconic rare and rarity differences is effectively iconic rares are foiled alternate cards. The core iconic cards are an alternate version of them with units, programs, and gears. And then there's legend iconic rares, which is the alternate artwork of the legends. I think the legend iconic rares are going to be the ones that players are probably going to lean towards trying to get more than the others, just because it's then something you're pretty much guaranteed to see in most games anyway. And then the secret iconic rares are alternate artworks of the 4 secret rare cards. So of course, the secret rares themselves only having 4, we'll see in a second, are going to be harder to get anyway. So then I'm guessing these are probably going to be like, you've played Grand Archive before, the CSR chase of the set will be the secret iconic rares, because they are less cards, less printed, so there's going to be a lot harder to find them. Now, the one thing I do feel is missing here is that CSR chase, or sorry, if you haven't watched Grand Archive before, Collector Super Rare. It's effectively a signature special foiled card from the set that is very limited in print run and very hard to find and generally holds a lot of value. Now, yes, the secret iconic rares might be that chase in this. However, I'm a sucker for like signature artist cards and very special, very low print run like serialized cards and the likes. That's probably coming from my sports card side of things, as well as the real high end chase of Grand Archive. But I just feel like there's something missing, especially in the retail version of these boxes, that there needs to be a chase of some kind for the people that want to open 30, 40 cases of this and then be able to flood the market with the singles, making them affordable for new players, while also having something themselves to chase and try and get. So in terms of booster pack distribution, we have 12 cards in a pack with 7 commons, 3 uncommons, and 2 rare plus cards. So a lot of games with their first sets only have 1 rare card in the pack. We've seen from Riftbound, who did the 2+ rare cards in a pack, it doesn't really work. Like, it does, it makes it accessible for players, but it means that a lot of the rares just have no value, because effectively you're opening 24, or as it says here, 36 packs in a box. You're going to end up with probably somewhere around the 56 to 60 rares. And when we look back a slide, there's only 32 rares in the pack. So you're most likely going to end up with 2 copies of a rare in a box, 3 of some, 1 of others. There'll be a bit of distribution amongst it. But with that, you're going to often open 2 boxes and probably have a playset of all the rare and below cards. Yes, this is good for the players. I'm happy about it as a player. As a collector and somebody who likes to open multiple boxes to then sell off the singles I don't need to help support the local player base, it doesn't really excite me, because I know that pretty much the only things that are going to be of value are going to be these iconic rares, and it leaves me in a situation of wondering, should I open or buy multiple cases of this if I know that the alternate cards are going to be the only value in them, and it's a little bit rough. You just wanted to jump back into this breakdown here. and point out that yes, my comments about the rares are correct. They are going to be heavily available and probably not worth a lot for most of them. They may short print some of the rares in order to add a bit of sought afterness to them. However, I do kind of hope they don't, just because I do find it really painful when you're opening boxes and boxes and boxes and getting very few of the rares, as it ends up in a situation where everybody's hunting for these same rares and they're going up so high in price that it kind of prices a lot of players out. However, we won't really know about that. I'm not too sure if they're going to release print numbers for this game. Grand Archive has done an amazing thing where they've got on their website accessibility to all the print numbers, so you can search up a specific card and find out how many of that card's been printed. So they effectively do this because of the collector side of the game, in terms of like all the collector super rares and collector ultra rares that just are real sought after by the community. And you can see that there's only 72 of this card, there's only 150 of this card printed, and they effectively doesn't create artificial sought afterness, but it becomes a situation of, you know exactly how many are out there, and you can use that info to help you with pricing the card, or when you're trying to buy the card, knowing what you're expecting to pay. And it does come down to the popularity of the game as well. This is probably going to be a lot bigger than what Grand Archive is, and printing a lot more cards. So depending on if they want to do first edition sets or not, it is something that I'd like to see come from them in terms of print numbers, so we know exactly how many of the higher end cards are printed. However, it is one of those ones where if they are constantly printing more and they're not able to keep track of exactly what they're printing, then it may become hard for them. But it's one of those ones I'd like to see them at least try. It's also important to note that the 12 epic rares in the set, these are 1 in 4 packs, so you are going to be looking about 6 of these in a retail box, and then probably an extra 3 in a Kickstarter box. These are still going to be hard to get. Epics are one of those things where you're going to be wanting a playset of certain ones, having to open probably 2 or 3 cases in order to get that playset. And it can put situations where a lot of the epics can just sink in value because they're not getting played, nobody wants them, and then having 3 or 4 of them that are just super high value. This is another one of those ones where sometimes businesses will short print a certain epic or super rare or whatever it is in that slot, just knowing that it's going to be a really powerful card and they want to make it sought after even more. But that can often hurt a game as well, so once again, I hope they don't do that. For the 4 secret rares, these are 1 in 24 packs. So you're effectively looking at 1 a box retail, 1.5, well, not even that, in Kickstarter boxes. So these are ultra rare. Like, effectively, they're an ultra rare by Grand Archive, which is fine. A lot of them do hold a lot of value if they're playable. If they're not playable, then they end up being worth not a lot. I don't mind them being 1 in 24 boxes, because at least you're guaranteed 1 in a box. However, it's going to definitely become one of those things again where you need a playset of a certain one and it becomes really hard to get a hold of, and they can become really expensive. So it's really going to come down to the price of the boxes and whether players are opening them by the case and selling all the staples off, or whether people are too scared to open by the case, knowing that the cards aren't worth a huge amount of money if the alternate secret iconic rares aren't hugely valuable. Then for the iconic rare slot, they're 1 in 18 packs. So you are going to effectively have a 1.5 chance of hitting an iconic rare. So you're guaranteed 1 in a box, possibly a second one. I'm not too sure how they're going to do the cases. It could be if you open a case, you're guaranteed to get the 6 from the boxes with another 3 guaranteed in the case, so 9 a case. But if they do true randomization, then you could end up with cases that have 12 in them and other cases that only have 6. Effectively, you've got the retail booster display, which is where you go into your LGS, look at their shelves, and this is what's going to be there. They're 24 pack displays, but then we've got the beta Kickstarter booster display of 36 packs. This is only accessible via the Kickstarter if you've backed it. It has finished now, however you haven't backed it yet. They are doing late vouchers at the moment, so you can go back it now. However, it is going to cost you a little bit more than it cost the rest of us when we backed it. And it's one of those ones where it's good that they're doing a separate box for the Kickstarter, because it just means there's a bit more collectability, a bit more sought afterness for that box. And as we see here, the main difference with them is that there is 31 different iconic rare alt arts in these boxes. So the retails can have the alt arts are going to be effectively set for that retail box display, and then the Kickstarter boxes are going to have a completely different lot of those 31 collector rares or iconic rares. Is this good? Yes. However, I do think that means that if you want to be a collector of the game, now you have to open multiple Kickstarter displays and multiple retail displays. It puts you in a little bit of a position of kind of trying to decide what it's worth opening more of. Now, I've only brought, I think it's 4 boxes of the Kickstarter, just because I wanted to get a couple of the beta boxes that come in the Kickstarter. So I did 2 different vouchers for the 2 boxes and 2 starter decks. However, I may need some more. So we'll see when it comes to adding stuff on, if I add any more boxes or not. Now, moving on to something that's a little bit different, languages. They've already announced it's going to be in English and French, and they did say in Main Deck Stream that they were looking at expanding into more languages. I do feel they need to be careful with this. As seen with Riftbound, and one of the reasons I actually left Riftbound to begin with, was the fact that they started allowing languages to mix, so people could play both the Chinese and the English in the deck together. I don't mind there being other languages for games. If you go to an international tournament, you sit across from an opponent and they've got different language in their deck, that's fine. That's what they are used to. If you go into those big tournaments, you should probably be used to the game enough that you can visualize cards based on the artwork. And even if even if you can't do that, then it's still something that you can possibly have a guide with you of the set, so you can see exactly what the cards are. And as with all games, I'm guessing you'll be able to call a judge for a translation if that is required. My main problem with this is they need to be careful not to expand the languages too fast, but also not add languages in too slow. And that's very contradictory of itself. The main thing is that if they try to expand the game too fast into multiple different languages, and suddenly they're having to print 6, 7, 8 different languages for a single game, they could often outproduce themselves and end up in a situation where they don't have the production available to meet the demand of every language, and you'll end up in situations where a lot of the languages are underprinted. Now, I'm hoping that English is their main language. That's going to be the one they focus on, and they're going to be able to just keep that stocked all the time, so there's no scalping or another Pokemon or One Piece people come over trying to scalp it. But you do have to look at it and kind of judge based on where the demand is. I'm seeing a lot of Germans already out there, so I do feel like we might get a German language eventually. Chinese is definitely one of those ones that would be good to get in there, just because the Chinese market for a lot of games is massive. But yeah, I'd probably limit it to 4, maybe 5 languages if they're going to expand languages. But then that rolls us on to the next point of not doing it too slow. Now, it's been very evident in One Piece from what I've seen that releasing in one language first and then trying to play catch up with another language is very rough. So what they can't be doing is basically waiting 4, 5, 6 sets and then suddenly going, oh, we want to add this language to the game now. Because then they effectively are in a situation of now they have to decide, does that language just completely miss out on the first 4 or 5 sets? Do they have to rush print the first 5 sets for this game and then have to release it in quick intervals in order to catch up with the meta of the current game? Or do they put themselves in a position of having to effectively play that game in a different bubble for that language? Anyone's playing that language is effectively 2, 3 sets behind, and maybe shorten the release window slightly so you catch up over time, which is what One Piece has done. This ends up in a very broken community, a situation where effectively those languages can just look at what happened in the English and French versions and then just effectively play the exact same game, set a couple sets behind. So I do think that if they're going to add languages, they need to do it fairly early on so that all the languages can be in one block. We can all release at the exact same time. There is none of this China getting the set 2 months early and then suddenly we get it later on. That's one thing about Riftbound I absolutely hate, is the fact that by the time you sit down your boxes, cards have already set at a certain price based on what China's done with Riftbound, and the meta's already not figured out, but the meta's already pretty stagnant, and you know what's going to be good. So I do think it's definitely going to be one of those things where they need to just do everything at once so that everyone has the same timing for opening stuff and is able to figure out the meta together rather than being locked in at a predetermined meta that was decided by elsewhere. Judges. I am a judge for Grand Archive and technically a judge for Riftbound. I've stopped doing anything to do with Riftbound, but I like to be a judge in pretty much every game I play. Not generally to actually go judge at events, but mainly just to be a judge for locals to help the local scene out, but then also be able to understand the rules enough myself so that I can then teach new players, do this YouTube side of it, and actually understand the game from a core base level rather than having to just kind of go by and not really understand the rules and just take what other people say as gospel. Now, they've already announced that they're doing a judge program from day one. Amazing. There have been multiple games that have come out and their judge program have taken way too long to get set up. Grand Archive had that problem. The judge program took way too long to set up, and there was a lot of situations where people weren't too sure on the rulings. Everyone was giving different rulings because nobody knew who the judges necessarily were. And even those that were actually heavily involved in judging events, just half the time they were wrong because there wasn't actually an official test or anything testing and showing what they are wrong about. Now, what supports it going to get? We don't know yet. We don't know if it's just going to be a test online or if they're going to actually require people to judge events and get not judged on their how they judge, but effectively just do the events in order to actually get the points to then become a certain level judge or whatever. That's still up in the air. I do have faith that they're probably going to do a good system that actually allows judges to progress and show that they've got judging experience in order to go to those bigger events. Because as we saw from a recent Riftbound event in New Zealand, the judging was absolutely atrocious by the sounds of it, and it was a situation of unvetted judges not knowing what they're doing and just wanting to go for the comp and not really knowing the game enough that as they should have for a competition like that. So I hope they do have a lot of support for it in terms of resources and helping players, judges get ready for big events. I also hope that they have decent judge comp. That's one good thing about Grand Archive's judge system, is that the judge like comp support is amazing. Not necessarily going to events, but just like I'm a judge. I've been judging since the game, well, since the judge system came out, but since the game came out as well. And on their system, I'm currently, I believe, level 20, which is pretty high up there for a lot of judges. But effectively, I've got there just from doing locals. I've never judged a regionals, never judged a massive event. There are judges that are upwards of level 30 plus just from going to those big events. So I'm not a high level judge, but I'm not a low level judge. And for that, I get 3 copies of a promo card sent to me every season. You 4 is a place in Grand Archive, so you get 4 promos sent to you if you are, I think it's above level 22 or level 23. I probably won't be getting there anytime soon because the amount of XP I gain for the judge level, just judging at locals, isn't that much. So I would need to judge for multiple seasons in order to get there. And they seem to be raising that bar every now and again over the course of a season. Oh, sorry, every couple seasons, in order to mean that only the judges who are truly judging at events get those full set of promos, which is fine. I understand it. I do think it kind of gatekeeps new judges getting into the game because they kind of look at the current requirements to get the promos and they're like, I don't know if I want to do that. seeing as they can probably judge every ascent in a season and still not get the promos. But overall, I just hope they have some kind of just support for judges locally in terms of if you want to judge at locals, that's fine. You can keep doing your thing, and then we'll send you maybe a promo, maybe some sort of, I don't even know how to be this done, discount on boxes that a store can claim back against the orders or something. There's no set way to do it. I just think that's important to give judges something to entice people to actually want to judge. And it's one of those ones where you're going to end up with a lot of scenes that don't have judges because nobody wants to judge if the support is not there. And I know a lot of places in the world pay their judges for like store champs and stuff. Here in New Zealand, good luck. You walked into an LGS and tried to say that you were a judge and that you wanted to get paid for your judging, you'd be asked to quickly leave and they will judge it themselves. Because, yeah, there is no judge comp here. Effectively, all you're doing is to gain the XP, gain the experience, gain whatever it is in the system. And if the system has nothing like that, I do feel New Zealand will be very lacking in judges, especially. Set releases. Now, they did say in the stream earlier today that having a slower set cadence was their plan. So they effectively want to slowly release a new set slower than what most games do. So if you look at like Magic, every month there's a new set coming out currently. Pokemon, every month. I think Flesh and Blood is like once every 3 months or something. I'm not too sure. I don't follow it closely. However, Grand Archive is once every 4 months for a new set. I think that is the perfect slot to be in. It's not like you're going to end up with a very stale meta the whole time, but you're also going to have enough sets coming out over the year to keep everything fresh, and there's not going to be the set fatigue that they talked about. That's the main thing with like MTG players and stuff at the moment, is there's a massive amount of set fatigue. You effectively are constantly feeling like you have to buy the next set to keep up, to get the new cards, to keep playing, to be competitive. And that isn't what you want out of your player base. Yes, they might make more money if they release more sets more often, but ultimately you're going to end up killing the game because people just decide it's not worth it in order to try to keep up competitively. The only reason MTG's survived like it has is just the age of it and the amount of money that is behind it. I think if you released MTG these days, it would probably flop in its current state. It would flop within a few months because players would be just not prepared to spend that kind of money on a new game. So what do they need to do? There's not really a set answer for that. I think they're doing what they need to do perfectly at the moment. Everything they do seems to be in the best interest of the players, of the community, and that's what I really love. They have already set up a way for creators to get a bit of support and get the resources. So I put a ticket into the Discord today to effectively going, I'm interested in making content. Do you have any like resources or anything for the game, like this Cyberpunk symbol here? This is not publicly available anywhere from what I can find. And immediately they were like, here's a whole lot of resources you can use to make your video, and basically come back to us once you've started making a video and we'll add you into all these different chats and everything that they've got with content creators, which is amazing. It's taken other games years to get systems like this in place. There's still games out there that don't have these systems in place because they either think they're too big or just don't care about the creators as much. And I think it's important to bring up the small creators and actually have a wide range of creators. So as you see from my Grand Archive stuff, I mainly focus on budget content that is affordable for players to get into the game at a decent level. So not just starter decks and everything. This is like competitive decks that are actually affordable. It won't be the top tier of stuff, but it'll be things that I feel like you can go to locals, do well with it, and actually compete. And that's one of the things that I'm kind of looking at this game about and thinking that mainly with this small set size 1, being that things are going to be pretty cheap, and it's going to be a pretty cheap game to get new players into, which is good for building a community, but isn't great for the overall longevity of the game in terms of a set actually holding value. So I'd probably say the one thing I want them to work on is possibly getting that set size up a little bit, just so that we can start having a lot more diversity within the meta and not being very stagnant early on. I think how they're going to do the printing and everything has been absolutely amazing. The Kickstarter idea is probably what every TCG that comes out from now on should do, because as we saw from Riftbound's released, they underprinted everything. It was impossible to get your hands on product, and you end up in situations where the player base is just not happy, and people like me end up just leaving because it's just not worth hanging around. So being able to actually know that I'm getting this much product on release and it's going to be available in my LGS. I've already talked to my store owners and they've already ordered in multiple cases of the set. They're preparing to support the game massively, and that's absolutely amazing. I think I'm one of the few people locally that's actually put my voice forward about it so far, so I hope we get a few more people. I'll probably be doing the print and play a little bit and taking the decks and get people to try it out to build a bit of hype locally about it. But yeah, so overall, there's not much they need to change. Their community interaction is, I want to almost say, the best I've seen out of any game. Grand Archive early on was very similar. They were very active in the community, talking to everybody. You could easily get a hold of them and they would listen to whatever you had to say. Lately, Grand Archive's kind of dropped off in terms of the communication side of things. I've still got 3 or 4 emails that have not been replied to. And that's coming from a content creator that is decent in their community. And yeah, so that's kind of dropped off, and I hope that doesn't happen with Cyberpunk. I hope they keep communicating with the player base, keep talking to us, keep being open about what's going on. So I think as long as you are open with what is happening to the players will hang around and wait and hold on. The one thing I am a little bit concerned about with the Kickstarter side of things is the fact that it's around the state we'll have the product out. If you've done any Kickstarter before, the stuff never gets released on the date that they say it's going to get released. There's always delays, always problems, and that's understandable. It is a brand new manufacturing process for them. They've got to get everything set and correct before they can even start printing it in mass. And even then, there's going to be distribution problems, and especially with everything going on in the world at the moment, that can delay things. So we can't be too hard on if it gets delayed, but I do hope that they're able to do everything in their power to keep it closer and get the release date as soon as possible. Because the one thing I'm worried about at the moment is that we've got 5-6 months until we get this product into our hands, and you could quite easily see a drop off in people being hyped about it, a drop off in the players that are actually testing and wanting to play the game. And when it does finally release, suddenly you're at half the player base actually active, and the release isn't as big as we think it might be. So to finish off, one final note: keep doing what you're doing, devs. You're doing an amazing job. I hope that this game absolutely takes off and keeps going even higher. I'm looking forward to seeing what else gets released. I can't wait to start testing the game and playing a bit more. Until next time, stay safe.